Welcome to episode 4 of Coffee Breaking Crime. It's your host,
Crystal.
and Celine. So grab your mug, sit back, relax, and unwind while we get into today's mystery.
Hey, Celine.
Hey, Crystal.
All right, before we get started, let me know what's in your cup.
I just have basic cold brew today. Oh, look at us, coffee twins.
Right. Cold brew with a little bit of caramel creamer.
My favorite.
Yep.
So it's finally our first recorded video. Are you excited?
I'm so excited. This is the first time that we've been able to really show our faces to our listeners.
I'm very excited to record and finally move to YouTube. Although we have our, audios on YouTube, it'll be nice to, for everyone to see our faces, like you said.
Right.
And we also have a Facebook page now.
We do. So if you are on Facebook, look for us, Coffee Break and Crime, and go ahead and follow our page.
Absolutely. And also, keep up with us on Instagram as well. And subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Anchor.
Right. All of our links will be down below in the description box. So just head down there and click and find us everywhere.
Yeah. So are you ready to get into it?
I'm ready. I'm curious to see what you have for me today.
Okay. Well, it's kind of interesting because it started out as me getting into a case about one person, and then the case ended up being about two people, two missing women.
Wow.
Yeah. Today we'll be discussing 25-year-old Typhenie Johnson, who has been missing since October of 2016. And while Typhenie's story was being shown on the news, the family of another missing woman whose case had been cold for over a decade noticed a connection between the two cases. Taalibah Islam, a 20-year-old woman, also from the same area as Typhenie, the Fort Worth, Texas area. She's been missing from that same area since January of 2006.
Okay.
So we'll just get into how these cases are connected and give you a little backstory. So we'll start in 2006 with Taalibah Islam, who was described by her sister as the class clown. She always had a smile on her face and making jokes. She was the youngest of 3 sisters, and she was born and raised in Fort Worth. Like I said, we're starting in about 2006, and Taalibah and her son's father, his name was Chris Reveal. From what I've been able to get offline, they seem to have had a pretty on and off relationship. There were some allegations of abuse as well. And while they were no longer living together in 2006, they weren't technically broken up either. So Taalibah brought their 3-month-old son to visit his father, Chris Reveal, on January 16th, 2006. And that was the last day that Taalibah was seen or heard from.
Ooh.
A few days later, although some outlets say a week or so later, on January 21st, possibly, Chris reported to the police that Taalibah was missing. She had left their child with him in his home. Then she left the house and she got into a dark green 4-door sedan that he'd never seen before with an unknown person at about 8 p.m. And she hadn't returned. And according to the police report, he advised the police that this is unlike Taalibah. She would never leave our son this long without at least calling in and checking on him. So it was strange. The police came out and took the report and everything. He also contacted Taalibah's family, and he told her family the exact same story. Their relationship was, kind of rocky sometimes. So sometimes Taalibah needed to take a break from Chris. And so it wasn't unusual for her to just, she knew a lot of people, she had a lot of friends, to just take a break and maybe not answer her phone for a couple of days. But she always checked on her son.
Right.
So that was the weird thing to them.
Yeah, that's always where it kind of goes wrong, is when a mother just disappears and no contact with the kids. It's usually when you know something is up.
Exactly. Exactly. So the police just basically accepted Chris's story at this point, and they never even considered him a suspect, which I found incredibly weird because they always suspect the boyfriend or the husband first, right?
Especially if they have problems in their relationship and he's the last person to see her.
Right. I'm still really confused on that. I mean, okay, I get it that he was the one who reported her missing and he was like concerned,
Hmm.
but still people do that to make themselves seem innocent. So
Exactly.
it's really weird that he wasn't even questioned as a suspect and they just assumed she left. About a week later, Taalibah's sister, Hadia, she contacted Chris because she was still in communication with him, and just to see if he had heard anything because he was the last person to see her sister. And he denied hearing any news, but he also pointed out that, he didn't know what to do with with their baby. He wasn't the main caretaker of their son, and he didn't know what to do. So Taalibah's sister Hadia told him you could to drop her nephew to her,
Hmm.
and she would take care of him, her and the family.
Okay.
And Chris did that. He did just that, and then he moved on with his life.
Wow. Just moved on.
He just moved on. Weeks passed and to a months passed, and the Islam family, they completely lost all contact with Chris. After he left his and Taalibah's son with them, he
Hmm.
moved out of his place where he was living, and he just never contacted them again, never checked on his son, nothing.
Well, that's sus.
Yeah, not the best father. Um, there was nothing, no answers on, about Taalibah. He was the last person who had seen her, so he was kind of their, gateway to try to see if there's more information.
Hmm.
There were no answers, no leads, there were no organized searches, and there was very little to no media coverage because they took Chris's story at face value. The police department did. To them, basically, she had left on her own. But the Islam family did perform searches on their own to find Taalibah. Like they knew something was off, something was wrong, something was up. She wouldn't just leave and not check on her son at all. Like we've said, she had that, she was, she was proud to be a mom. She loved her son. She
Hmm.
wouldn't just abandon him. But unfortunately, the case goes cold and it stays cold for 10 years.
Wow.
But during this time, the Islam family, they didn't give up. Like I said, they performed searches, they raised Taalibah's son, and they continued their search. They had flyers made, shirts, they posted pictures all around the area, still trying to raise awareness. I even read in one place that someone stopped them and was like, who is this person, that you have on this picture on the flyers? And they told the person the story, and the people were surprised. They hadn't even heard of Taalibah Islam and that she was missing in their city, in their area. That's just how little coverage her story got.
No media attention.
No media attention. Now we fast forward to about 2008, and Chris Revelle is childless now. He's living his life, doing his own thing, hasn't checked on his kid.
Living the best life, just going on.
Exactly. But he is in and out of jail. He was
Well,
arrested in 2008 and sentenced to 5 years. Okay, for aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon, aggravated robbery, and for assault because he bit a police officer.
wait, what?
Yeah. I mean, he only got 5 years.
5 years for biting the cop?
And an aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon, and he only got 5 years. So he was sentenced for 5 years. He was released in March of 2013, but then he found himself in trouble once again. About 4 months later, after he was released in 2013, and he pleaded guilty to the charge of burglary with the intent to commit assault. And he was again sentenced to 5 years in prison until he was paroled in July of 2015.
So obviously he has violent
Tendencies.
And I mean, obviously the cops or the investigators with Taalibah are not connecting the two.
Well, there's nothing to connect because there's no investigation.
Right. That's correct. They just assume she left.
They just assume she left. So there's no investigation going on.
No one's looking into this whatsoever.
Right. And no one's looking
for the family.
Except for the family who do really, when you think about it, searches, organized searches and things like that cost lots of money. It's hard to put it just on a family. You know what I mean?
Right.
So now we're in July of 2015, where Chris Reveal has been paroled from prison. And later on, around the beginning of 2016, is when he meets Typhenie Johnson.
Okay.
Now, I haven't been able to confirm this, but the story of how they met is that Typhenie and this lady, let's just say, found out that they were dating the same guy. And so they were both like, oh, whatever. Okay, let's just let him go. And then a few months later, the girl introduced Typhenie to her newly fresh out of jail and single brother, Chris Reveal.
Really?
And that's how they met and started dating.
Wow.
It's a weird story. I read it, and I mean, I haven't been able to confirm it, but I just thought that it was kind of weird and cool.
That's weird.
Yeah. So Typhenie Johnson was, and I have been using was, although, we're not sure at this point. Typhenie is still just missing. Typhenie Johnson is described as having an outgoing spirit and a smile by her family and friends. She is the youngest of 4 children, and she and her twin brother, Asher, actually shared an apartment in the Fort Worth area when they moved down from Iowa. So they're not originally from the area.
Okay.
So around the beginning of 2016 is when Typhenie was introduced to Chris. And they dated for a while, but we know his history at this point, and it just wasn't the best relationship. And Typhenie wasn't happy. In August of 2016, she actually contacted her aunt, Janelle, who is very involved in keeping up awareness of Typhenie's case. Like she was the main one posting on the the Facebook page and things like that. She's the family member that I see gives the most like interviews and continually trying to raise awareness of Typhenie's case. Well, she called her aunt and she asked for advice on how to break up with someone because she just was ready to end it.
And I wonder how much of his past that she was aware of.
We're going to get into it, but not much at all.
Oh,
at all.
Okay.
So, I mean, I do think that, so from what I read, she was aware that he had been in prison.
Okay.
And like he has tattoos, and her family met him and they were like, oh, we don't judge by, which is good. I mean, you don't have to judge someone because they've been to prison. Obviously there's a repeated,
I mean, in a way, if you've been to prison multiple times for violent offenses, then, I mean, what do they say? The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Exactly. So we know you're a violent person. It's in you to be violent. So that is something to be cautious about.
I don't know if they knew the extent of his charges and things like that, but I do think that her and her family were aware that he had just recently been paroled and things like that. But she did ask her aunt advice on how to break up with someone, and she ended it, or she tried to end it, but he just kept coming back. Despite her, breaking it off, telling him it's over, he didn't want to let it go. It seems that as I'm reading about them and their relationship, he seems quite obsessed.
Maybe a little narcissistic.
A narcissistic as well, but he seemed to be very obsessed with her. But he just kept coming back, even when Typhenie moved on with her life and she started like seeing other people. He wouldn't accept that they were over.
Oh no.
In October, so it's October 10th, 2016, Typhenie, Asher, and Asher's girlfriend Jessica, they're all at the apartment. Remember, Typhenie lives with her brother Asher.
Oh yeah.
Turns out also that Typhenie worked with Jessica, so they kind of all knew each other. So they're at the apartment. It seems like they're having a get together that night, and Tiffany's new boyfriend, maybe, he's coming over as well. And guess who shows up? Chris.
Well, I assume so.
Yeah, he shows up to supposedly pick up something he left in the apartment after their breakup. Here it does get a little bit confusing to me, because some of what I read says that some call him the boyfriend and some calls him the newer friend, the friend, because maybe they weren't 100% official yet. But some says that he was already there, and some outlets say that he came after Chris was there. So either way, though, this is an awkward situation.
Right.
Your ex and your new person that you're possibly dating or wanting to date being there, it's going to create an awkward situation.
Yes.
But to avoid conflict, Typhenie takes Chris outside. She goes to speak with him outside to talk. And according to her brother Asher, she didn't even put her shoes on. She had on just like some regular clothes, and she had on some black ankle socks, I think. And she didn't even put her shoes on. We're like from the country. Sometimes you might just, if you're going in and out really quick, you might just go out with your socks.
Yeah, if you're going to be in the driveway or
right,
going to the car or something like that, you might
not put your shoe on, because you don't expect to stay. You're going in and out.
Right.
And I feel like that's what Typhenie thought. Like, she thought she was just stepping out for a moment.
Right.
So they're standing outside talking. They're in the parking lot next to Typhenie and Chris's car. They're both parked near each other in the parking lot. And Typhenie and Chris are talking out in front of the building, and they're actually visible from the apartment's balcony. So Asher and Jessica and the new friend, we don't know his name, unfortunately, they can see Typhenie and Chris from the balcony, and they can hear the conversation. So they're just checking in on her, making sure everything's okay. But they can see them, so they're okay at this point. But at one point during this whole debacle, Tiffany's friend actually goes downstairs and he checks on her. But he later tells police that when he approached them, Typhenie told him, it's okay, go back inside.
Yeah, and if he's a new guy, he's like, okay, let me let them do their thing.
Yeah. So he does. He goes back inside. But him and Asher and Jessica, they continue to monitor them and the conversation from the balcony every so often. Not trying to be all in their business, like out of the balcony, but
making sure she's good.
Right. Check in on her and making sure she's good. Now, after about 20 minutes, Typhenie and Chris, for some reason, they end up moving to the side of the apartment building. And this makes them no longer in sight.
Okay.
they can't see them from the balcony anymore, but they can still hear the conversation. The conversation is still audible. They can hear pieces of the conversation.
Okay.
Okay. So, they're still going and they're kind of doing their things, but also just kind of checking in on them. But after about another 20 minutes, Chris comes up to the apartment alone. Wow. And Asher is like, where's Typhenie? And Chris informed him that she left. She had gotten into a car and left with someone, an unknown car. He didn't know who it was.
So Chris is playing this role again?
Yes, the exact same story.
With people.
The exact same. This is his go-to, I guess. It's the exact same story he told about Taalibah 10 years earlier, right?
Right.
So while he's up there, he actually grabbed some of his belongings from the apartment. So there actually was some of his belongings there. And then he left. But Asher obviously sensed something was wrong. So Asher, sensing that something is wrong, he immediately calls his sister's cell phone and he doesn't get an answer. So when he looks outside, he doesn't see Chris's car. He sees Typhenie's car, but remember, Chris's car was parked near Typhenie's. So he assumed that Chris is left. So he goes outside to look for his sister. But when he gets outside, Chris is still there. He had moved his car to the side area of the apartment where he and Typhenie had been talking. But it was backed up onto the grass. The doors were open and the trunk was open, and he was standing with the trunk open looking into the trunk. So Asher was a little wary and he didn't want to approach Chris because he was like, I don't know if he has weapons. This guy is crazy, So he waited until Chris closed the doors and the trunk, and he drove off. And some of the reports says that Chris did this when he noticed Asher come, like that he was outside. Mm-hmm. But that's when, after he drove off, is when Asher approached the area where the car had just been, and in the grass he found Typhenie's phone and one of her socks.
Ooh.
And then her keys. Okay, so I have conflicting reports. One report says that her keys were on top of her car. Sometimes when you're out talking, you might put your keys up there. And another report says that her keys were just in the parking lot. So, which both are right. I mean, the keys were in the parking lot, whether they were on the ground or on top of her car.
Mm-hmm.
Asher sees this and he calls Chris and he demands that he come back now. He returns back now to the apartment. And Chris told him that he would turn around and he was coming back. But after 15, he did not. No, after 15 minutes, nothing. Chris didn't return. So they conflicting reports again. Some say that Asher called the police and some says that Jessica did. Either way, the Fort Worth Police Department was called, and upon their arrival, obviously Asher's explaining the situation, but he also calls Chris again. And this time the responding officer takes the phone and he ordered Chris to return back to the apartments. And according to the reports in the affidavit, Chris returned about 25 minutes later. After he returned, the officer noticed, and he put it in his report, that Chris was sweating profusely. So he questioned them, like, why are you so sweaty? What's going on? And Chris's response, it's hot out here. It's hot out. And the officer notated in the report as well. He's like, it's 64 degrees Fahrenheit. No one else is sweating. Why are you sweating?
64.
It's 64 degrees. So yeah, so there's that. Chris was arrested that night, and a search was done at his home that he shared with his parents. Now, Chris lived about 20 to 25 minutes away from Typhenie's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's a tight timeline. You know what I'm saying? I don't think Chris expected to be, I mean, obviously he was sweating, he was nervous, he was scared. I don't think he expected it to be so tight. But he returned in 25 minutes, so I'm assuming he must have made it home,
Right.
But they did search his home, and in the backyard, so in the backyard they found a bra, and it looked, how you have the clasp in the back of the bra? It
Mm-hmm.
looked like the clasp was stretched out, like it had been pulled, and it just gave way, and pulled off. You know what I
But it
mean?
wasn't broken?
It was just stretched.
Okay.
So
Well,
if you have the clasp like this and you pull it, they
oh,
unbend.
the actual metal part.
Yeah, those
Okay, I
parts.
thought you meant the material, because I was gonna say, look, sometimes when that bra is not the right size,
Yeah, no, it was the
the material
clasp.
stretch.
It was those,
The little hook,
yeah, the
the
little
hook and
hook.
eye, the little hook.
So, and it was stretched out as if it had been pulled off. They
Mm-hmm.
also found a woman's shirt, a Fitbit with a broken clasp, and a man's shirt. We don't know. It's unknown, at least to us, who these items belong to. It's never been like officially released or said. But after being questioned, Chris' parents, they weren't home at the time. They had went shopping or eating dinner or something that night. But when they have returned home and gotten questioned, they said that they had not seen those items before that night. So,
To me, the people at the apartment should be able to verify. So I'm pretty sure the cops have to know.
they must know. It's not been told to us. There was some I'm assuming because it's kind of an older case, there's a lot of conflicting reports. For example, Asher said that she went out, in the black socks. Obviously, one of the black socks was found, but that she had on a shirt like with the word pink on it, like the Victoria's
Oh
Secret
yeah.
brand pink.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know if that was the shirt that was found, and we
Yeah.
don't know if she was wearing a Fitbit because they haven't released it.
That
That
just has to be what they aren't. Yeah, what they aren't releasing, because they would have to know. Somebody at that house knew what she had on
right.
before she disappeared, and I mean DNA. Who's the Fitbit for? You can see all that.
Right. Exactly. Chris's car was also taken and searched, and he was actually recorded at the scene. He was like, I don't understand, I'm feeling accused and you're taking my car and this and that. So his car was taken and searched. They didn't find any DNA in the trunk. And there was no blood or anything found like in the grassy area where Typhenie's phone and her sock was found.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are security cameras at the apartment complex, but they weren't working.
Of course.
So in a matter of 90-ish minutes, Typhenie was just gone. She was just gone. Wow. So as you can imagine, Typhenie's kidnapping, it makes the news and it's being reported and they're showing her photograph because she's missing, right? And they're trying to bring, have you seen her? This and that. And soon they start sharing Chris Revel's mugshot as well in these news stories. And the Islam family happens to see this mugshot on the TV screen and they're just like, flabbergasted. It's been 10 years. They haven't seen this man in 10 years. They're raising his son. They weren't contacted saying, hey, this man has been arrested for kidnapping. It could be tied to your sister, your family member, nothing.
Right. But like you said, they weren't investigating this.
They weren't investigating. They just saw it on the news. And they're hearing the story of what Chris told the cops about Typhenie's disappearance because he told the cops the same story he told Asher. she just got in a car with someone and left.
That's sad.
And still, they still weren't contacted by the police. Like you just said, there's no investigation. The Islam family came forward themselves with Taalibah's story, and Typhenie's family was shocked and horrified. Like,
I'm sure.
can you imagine finding out another woman has been missing for 10 years under similar circumstances?
And he's just going on about life, and y'all didn't even know.
They didn't know about Taalibah, and Typhenie didn't know that Chris had a 10-year-old son living in the same area.
Wow.
Like, they didn't know all of this. So it's just like crazy to even think about it. Like, these families are connected by this tragedy now, you know?
Right.
So thousands of acres of land in the Fort Worth area have been searched. And it's been searched based on like planning and I guess you can say educated guesses and details. Because keep in mind, the police does have Revel's phone. After he left Tiffany's, they know who he called, who he texted, who called him, where he went, what towers he pinged off of in the set amount of time of about that 90 minutes total from when he first left Tiffany's apartment after gathering his stuff and then leaving and then saying he was coming back and then didn't. You know what I'm saying? They know all this information. It hasn't been shared. We don't have the cell phone data. We don't have the towers of where it pinged. But I mean, it's my guess that they're searching in the areas where they think
he could have been in.
Right. Because it's a super tight time.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't have been too far.
Right.
And I mean, like you said, if they can triangulate the area that he was in according to the cell phone tower pinging, then they're searching in that area.
Right. And I mean, but it also has been since 2016. So
also, you know, like, because that's a very short amount of time.
Yeah. And so if it's a total, let's just say it's a total of about 90 minutes and it takes him about 25, let's give him the max, 25 minutes to get to his parents' house one way and then back. That's almost 60 minutes gone.
So that's just 30 minutes to do whatever he had to do.
Right.
So
so they have to create like a search based on where he could go in that time. You know, I'm sure it's a lot of guesswork, right. But again, the cell phone data hasn't been released to us.
Man.
So in August of 2019, Revel was convicted for the aggravated kidnapping of Typhenie Johnson, and he received life in prison with a possibility of parole in 2046.
Wow. So just kidnapping, not murder?
There's no body.
I know it's hard when there's no body, but
they can't prove it. And then, although he was convicted for Typhenie, not Taalibah's family was able to tell their story, and they did bring it up in court, and they were able to kind of add in, so to help the charges and stuff. But he wasn't convicted. There wasn't enough evidence.
But Taalibah.
For Taalibah. But I mean, this is a sense of justice in a way, but in a way not, because both of these ladies have never been found.
Right. If they've never been found, there's no answers.
Right.
You know that the person responsible is behind bars, which is great, but no answers, nothing. Like, what did he do?
And he's not saying anything. Also, he even said that Asher lied. He never pulled his car back to the side of where they were talking. He never moved his car. But after they did some investigating, they found his tire tracks there. Like, he's just not obviously, telling the truth about anything. And it also brings me back to the point where I said, while I was reading this, I thought he was kind of obsessed. At one point during the trial, it was found that he had over 200 pictures and photographs of Typhenie in his belongings.
What?
Yeah, I think he was really obsessed.
That's extremely obsessed.
It's a sad and tragic story when you think about it. The Islam family would not have learned what happened to Taalibah without Typhenie. But if Chris Revel or Reveal was treated as a suspect when Taalibah went missing, then maybe Typhenie would never have gone missing.
Right.
It's a very sad, tragic story, but these are both, you know, they're just, there's been no updates lately. Well, actually in 2020 there was a body found on some remains found on in some private property in the area, and the families were, you know, I don't want to say they were hoping, but you know, some, you kind of want some closure. It turned out that it was male, so it didn't have anything to do with either of these ladies. But you know, they're still taking tips. You can call anonymously, and you can contact the Fort Worth Police Department if you've seen either of these ladies or if you have any information. Both of them have never been found. There's been no bodies. Technically, they're still missing.
That is, that to me, that's the craziest part of the whole situation, is that especially in Typhenie's case, he did not have much time.
Right.
And the fact that they still have not found her in that small window of time that he had to do whatever he did, and they still haven't found her. That's really, really, really crazy to me.
You know, I kind of go onto the Reddit groups after doing research on the cases to kind of see what people are saying. And some person posted and said that she lives in the Dallas area and she's never heard of either one of these cases.
Wow.
And I think that that's just horrible because they're still missing. I mean, it's a chance that they're somewhere. It's been a long time, but you know, their families haven't given up, and they do hope one day that maybe they will find their family members alive, or at least get some sense of closure. I also saw on there that Asher, I think he told investigators that about a week before Typhenie went missing, they were hanging around at some lake. I don't have the name of it. I just kind of glanced over this on the Reddit boards. They were hanging around at a lake and they were drinking and stuff. And it's one of the things is it's a little weird because they have been broken up, but it was just a week before. So it seems like he was still around a bit. But when they were drinking and he made a comment about this is where he gets rid of all his bodies. This is where he dumps all his bodies. So I'm sure if Asher told that to the investigators, they must have searched that area.
I would hope so.
But that was just something that I was kind of like, whoa, I need to look into this a little bit more. But yeah, both of these families have to live with the fact that they don't know what happens to their family members. And the Islam family is still raising Taalibah's son.
Yeah. And he's a bold somebody because he did in both instances, there was someone around. Like the son, I understand it's a small child, but in the second case, they were at a place where there were many people around.
Yeah. So it makes me feel like Taalibah might have been premeditated, but Typhenie was more spur of the moment.
Yeah. Because with Taalibah, he knew she was coming to bring the son and he had time to plan whatever. But with Typhenie, it was a different story. He probably just got angry. Or, I mean, it could have been premeditated because he wasn't invited there. He invited himself. He went there.
Yeah, but he had always just gone there. Like he just wouldn't take no for an answer and kept coming around. But I think that I feel like it was kind of spur of the moment because there was so many people around and so people upstairs watching and listening to them, you know. And also another thing with Taalibah's case, he had so much more control over the situation. He had a whole week to get whatever he needed done and planned and what he was going to say before he even reported her, before anyone knew she was really missing.
That's true.
So he had ample time. In Typhenie's case, because how it feels spur of the moment, he did not give himself 90 minutes is what we're working with here. And when he came back, he was sweating and the police was called, and I don't think he thought he was going to get caught. You know, that tight timeline of 90 minutes, and he thought that he could play it off a little bit better, you know, telling Asher she left.
Right.
But Asher obviously acted on his instinct and called the police immediately when he saw the sock and the phone, and he was sweating profusely. You know, he was nervous. I just don't.
But you know what's weird? That he came back. Because
the police told him to come back.
I know, but he could have just ran or just didn't come back. That's weird that he came back.
I think, this is my personal opinion, I think that he came back in order to avoid the police going to his house. I don't think that he thought he was going to be arrested, and there was evidence in the backyard.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
That's what I think happened. But
I'm thinking, like, how narcissistic do you have to be to think that you can just come back and you're so cool, calm, collected, and you'll be okay? No one's gonna believe it's you. But you're right. If he didn't want the cops to go back to his house, he had to go to them.
I think that's what he did. Yeah. Overall, it's a sad case. I mean, he's in prison. He's not speaking. He's not saying anything when he could just bring so much peace to these two families by just speaking on what happened. But, you know, obviously he won't.
It's a sad, sad thing.
Sad, sad thing. Yep. And that is our case for today of Typhenie Johnson and Taalibah Islam. Remember, you know, any tips, anything like that, anything you think of, something, I know it was a long time ago, but, you know, contact the Fort Worth Police Department. You can remain anonymous. And at minimum, we just wanted to bring awareness to these two cases of these two missing women who many people still haven't even heard of.
Right. I mean, because I live in Texas, you live in Texas, but I had never heard of this before. Granted, I haven't been in Texas all that long, but still, in something like this, you would think it would be at least national news.
Exactly. And in the point of, I think from what I've learned from Typhenie, I don't think it hit national news, but like local in the county and probably in the state. And then, but in the case of Taalibah, hardly nothing.
There was no coverage whatsoever.
Right.
All right. So if any of the viewers out there, you know anything, like she said, go ahead and contact the police department. Let us know if y'all have heard of this case and what y'all heard about it. If we missed anything or y'all know something that we haven't heard about, leave it in the comment section if you're watching on the YouTube. But be respectful of the family, you know, just keep everything respectful in the comment section. Also, if you have any cases that you feel we should cover, then you can leave that in the comment section below. But also, you can head over to our Instagram and leave us a DM or on our page on Facebook. Mm-hmm. Well, y'all, thank you for joining us for our coffee break. Break time's now over. New episodes will be on Anchor and Spotify every Wednesday and on YouTube on Saturdays. And we'll see y'all next break time. Bye.
Bye.